In this episode, we focus on how to determine survivability and resiliency capabilities in a way that is honest, evidence-based, and free from the kind of false confidence that can quietly set an organization up for failure. Survivability is the ability to keep critical functions alive when conditions are hostile, uncertain, or damaged, while resiliency is the ability to adapt and recover so the organization can continue delivering what matters over time. These words are easy to say and hard to prove, and many organizations accidentally confuse plans, tools, or good intentions with real capability. False confidence often shows up when a team assumes that because a plan exists, recovery will be fast, or because backups exist, data will be recoverable, or because someone once did a drill, the organization is ready for any disruption. The goal of this lesson is to teach a beginner-friendly way to think about capability as something you measure and validate, not something you declare. We will build an approach that uses clear definitions, realistic constraints, and practical evidence, so resiliency claims reflect what the organization can truly do. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A good starting point is to separate survivability and resiliency from simple availability, because these ideas are related but not identical. Availability is a property of a system or service being accessible when needed, often measured as uptime. Survivability goes further by asking whether the organization can continue essential work even when parts of the environment are degraded, attacked, or physically disrupted. Resiliency goes further still by asking whether the organization can adjust, recover, and improve after disruption, not merely return to the previous state. For new learners, an analogy is helpful. A bicycle might be available when it is in the garage, but survivability is being able to keep moving even if the road is rough or a tire loses pressure. And resiliency is being able to repair the tire, adjust the route, and still reach the destination. In security and operations, this means you evaluate not only whether systems can stay up, but whether essential outcomes can be delivered under stress and whether recovery is dependable when failure occurs. This distinction matters because organizations often invest in availability features while ignoring the human and process factors that determine survivability and resiliency in real events. To determine capabilities, you need clear definitions of what you are measuring, because vague claims create misleading conclusions. A claim like "we can recover quickly" is meaningless unless you define what recover means, what quickly means, and what conditions are assumed. In recovery planning, time constraints often include how long a service can be unavailable and how much data loss can be tolerated, but those constraints must be connected to business outcomes. Survivability measures might include whether essential functions can continue in degraded mode, such as limited staffing or reduced connectivity. Resiliency measures might include whether the organization can restore key services within required time windows and whether it can maintain integrity and trust during and after recovery. Clear definitions also include scope. Are you measuring one application, a department's workflow, an entire enterprise, or a specific facility? When scope is unclear, people may assume a capability exists everywhere when it was only tested in one narrow area. Evidence is the antidote to false confidence, and evidence comes from more than documents. Evidence includes test results, exercise outcomes, logs showing recovery actions worked, and real incident performance data where recovery was actually attempted under pressure. Evidence also includes whether roles are staffed, whether backups are current and recoverable, whether critical dependencies are known, and whether communications channels function during disruption. A plan is not evidence of capability. It is a hypothesis about capability. Testing and operational experience provide evidence, but only if they are designed and evaluated honestly. For beginners, a simple rule is to ask, what proof do we have that this would work on a bad day, not just on a normal day? If the proof is only confidence, assumptions, or a vendor promise, then the capability is likely weaker than people think. A common source of false confidence is relying on best-case assumptions, such as assuming key staff will be available, networks will be stable, or vendors will respond immediately. Determining survivability and resiliency requires you to challenge these assumptions deliberately. For example, if the organization's continuity plan depends on remote work, you should ask what happens if a regional outage affects both staff homes and the primary office. If recovery depends on a vendor, you should ask what happens if the vendor is impacted by the same widespread event and support is delayed. If recovery depends on privileged access, you should ask what happens if the identity system is down or if the normal approval chain is unreachable. These are not pessimistic questions, they are realism questions. Capability in this context is the ability to succeed despite imperfect conditions. So measuring capability without stress conditions produces misleading results. Dependencies are another reason resiliency is often overestimated, because organizations underestimate how many things must work for a critical function to survive. A business process may depend on identity services, network routing, storage, time synchronization, communications tools, and specific people who understand the workflow. If any one of those dependencies fails, the process can stall. Determining survivability means mapping essential functions to their critical dependencies and then asking whether those dependencies have redundancy, recovery paths, and verification checks. It also means understanding shared dependencies, where many systems rely on the same underlying component, creating a large blast radius when it fails. Beginners often think in a one-system-at-a-time way, but survivability is a property of a system of systems. When you analyze dependencies honestly, you often discover that what looked like resilience was actually a single point of failure with a backup that has never been proven. Survivability assessment also benefits from thinking in layers, because resilience is often built by stacking multiple safeguards rather than relying on one. Layers can include alternate processes, alternate communication channels, alternate work locations, and alternate data sources, along with technical redundancy. The question is not only whether a backup exists, but whether it is usable under the conditions of a real disaster. If the backup system requires the same network path as the primary system, it may fail in the same event. If the alternate site is in the same region, it may share the same weather or infrastructure risks. If the alternate process relies on a specific person, it may fail during a staffing disruption. Determining capability means evaluating whether the layers are truly independent enough to survive the kinds of disruptions you are concerned about. Independence is a key concept here, because layered controls that fail together provide less protection than people assume. Resiliency assessment also requires attention to integrity and trust, because recovery that restores incorrect or compromised systems can be worse than downtime. After a disruptive event, especially a security incident like ransomware, the organization must be able to confirm that restored data is correct and that systems are not still compromised. This is where verification becomes a core capability, not a luxury. A resilient organization has defined checks that confirm functionality and safety, such as confirming access control behavior, confirming logging is active, and confirming that critical workflows operate without corruption. False confidence often comes from treating restoration as success without verifying outcomes. For beginners, the key idea is that being back online is not the same as being back to safe operations. A true resiliency capability includes the ability to return to trustworthy operations, not just operational appearance. Another subtle source of false confidence is confusing effort with readiness, such as believing that because teams are busy improving plans, they must be prepared. Readiness is demonstrated by results, not activity. Determining capability includes asking whether plans are current, whether people know their roles, whether exercises are repeated, and whether improvements from lessons learned are actually implemented. It also includes understanding how quickly readiness decays, because staff turnover, system changes, and vendor changes can make last year's capability irrelevant today. A practical assessment looks for evidence of maintenance, such as regular updates to contact lists, regular review of dependencies, and repeated exercises that include realistic constraints. Without maintenance, capability becomes stale and confidence becomes inflated. The goal is to treat resiliency like a muscle that weakens without use and strengthens with disciplined practice. To avoid false confidence, it helps to express survivability and resiliency conclusions with appropriate precision and conditions. Instead of saying we are resilient, You might say that certain essential functions can continue for a defined period under a defined set of assumptions, and that certain systems can be restored within certain time windows based on test evidence. You can also communicate uncertainty clearly, identifying where evidence is weak and where the organization should invest to strengthen capability. This kind of honest reporting may feel less satisfying than bold claims, but it supports better decisions and better resource allocation. Leaders can only make good trade-offs when they understand true capability and true gaps. For beginners, this is a lesson in professional discipline. Humility backed by evidence leads to stronger security than confidence backed by optimism. Capability assessments should help the organization improve, not help it feel comfortable. Determining survivability and resiliency without false confidence means defining what survivability and resiliency actually mean for the organization, then demanding evidence that those capabilities exist under realistic conditions. You challenge best-case assumptions, map critical dependencies, evaluate independence of recovery layers, and ensure that verification of integrity and trust is part of recovery success. You distinguish plans and activity from proven readiness, and you recognize that capability decays unless it is maintained through repeated testing and improvement. Finally, you communicate capability with precision, including conditions and limitations, so leaders understand what is truly possible and what still needs work. When an organization builds this evidence-based approach, it replaces comfort with clarity, and that clarity is what drives the control improvements and investments that make resilience real.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.